Welcome to the Filmlings Podcast,
a bi-weekly podcast where we analyze all that goes into effective filmmaking.
I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Alex.
And this is episode 76, Serious Series 1, Being Bond, James Bond.
Yeah, and if you think that I knew that it would be Jonathan saying that title when I wrote it, you are correct.
Yeah, we even got our episode number today to match our alliteration. When will we stop, Alex?
Yes, I've been planning that since day one, ever since starting with Spielberg. I was like, wow, these S's really go together.
Can't wait till we get to 76.
76. I've been planning it all along. Anyway, it's really exciting to be back for season 3 of the Filmlings podcast. And this season, we are amping things up a notch with a bit of a push to kind of reach out to you guys, get our audience excited for the season upcoming, and also seeing which of you audience members or how many of you guys are willing to help support the show. And to that extent, Jonathan and I have set up a Patreon page and a Ko-fi page, for the podcast. Links available in the blog post. And Jonathan, do you want to discuss what would be available for our fine listeners should they decide to support the show?
Yeah, absolutely. So for those who aren't familiar, Ko-fi is it's kind of like a tip jar. So it's a place where you can go and just send us a couple dollars, kind of one-time donation. And that definitely helps. We definitely do drink a lot of coffee for watching all of these movies and everything. And for days like today, where we are at the beginning of my day and the end of Alex's day, trying to get these podcasts out. And then over on Patreon, if you would like to do a more recurring style of subscription, starting from $1 going up to $10 a month, depending on what you would like to pledge, we have some different benefits for you. So at the $1 a month tier, you have access to our notes archive, where Alex and I try to keep notes every time that we watch one of these movies, and we're definitely going to be doing that going forward in order to kind of just let each other know what we're thinking. But a lot of those thoughts and things that go through our head where we're watching the movies or right after we're watching the movies don't always make it into this podcast. So if you would like to see a little bit more information, then you can get that for $1 a month. For $2 a month, you will have access to all of our subscriber access polls. So we used to do a bunch of polls on our Twitter account, but those are now moving to Patreon. So if you would like to have a say in what episodes we do, go over there and you can access those polls. And quick tip, there is no one subscribed right now. So if you would like to be the only one deciding what episodes we're doing, you can go check that out. And then at $5,
a democracy of one.
Right. So at $5 a month, you will have access to a bonus podcast, which topic is yet undecided, but you can have a say in that too. We're going to have a bonus podcast that will come out in between the time that our regular Filmlings episodes comes out every other week. So we're kind of going up in the air between going like very old and talking about film innovations and films that came out 1 century ago, since 100 years ago was pretty early on in film history, and there's a lot that we can look back on. And the other option that we're thinking about is talking about some very recent movies, and going into the theater and seeing those movies that are coming out currently. So we haven't really decided, so we'll probably leave it up to whoever decides to subscribe to that tier. And then for $10 a month, we are going to be doing film commentaries. It will be one or both of us doing a commentary on one of the films covered over the month. So yeah, so those, if any of those sound interesting to you, consider tossing us a couple bucks, and it definitely helps with supporting us. We have a little bit of overhead, like SoundCloud and our WordPress account, and everything else just goes to making this podcast more viable for us and more informative for you.
Yeah, we love improving your experience. And whether that's getting access to our notes, which are, at least in my case, we have a different style of note taking, but at least in my case is like somebody live tweeting an entire movie. or if it's learning what happened back in my day in 1919, back when we figured out if you crank the film camera faster, you make the film look slower, and other such technologies from
You see the latest
early-
Nickelodeon?
Oh, man. Actually, I think 1919 might have been past the Nickelodeon stage.
Yeah, probably.
It's interesting because 100 years ago, movies were actually, I mean, they were young, but they weren't like that young anymore. So it's interesting. There's a lot of interesting information that we're building for you guys. We're doing a lot of fun things this year, and we would love for you all to be a part of it. So get on board, be that democracy of one, and pick the polls. Pick what our side podcast is gonna all be about, and get that week to week filmings coverage. Go check it out if you can. Of course, you know us, we will keep you well reminded of it. And, of course, word of mouth helps too. So if you know anybody who is a film nerd, and I use that term lovingly, or likes learning about movies or art or any of that stuff, point them in our direction. We have the podcast for them. So yeah, come and check it out. And without further ado, let's talk about Bond, James Bond. So typically we talk about a biography at the top of the podcast if that's applicable. And we kind of have two biographies today. We have to talk about Ian Fleming, and we have to talk about James Bond. Ian Fleming was born in 1908. He was a man who served in the British Naval Intelligence Division during World War II and was a spy. This wasn't necessarily, or at least to the extent that we know, an out in the field license to kill operative like James Bond was. But he did partake in the Intelligence Committee, and maybe his most famous act was coming up with the idea and execution for Operation Mincemeat, which was a operation during World War II in which the Allies dropped a real dead British soldier into the Mediterranean Ocean with fake papers on him depicting the plan for an Allied invasion of Greece. The Germans found this, moved all of their troops to Greece, or at least a lot of them, and then, surprise, the Allies invaded Sicily. So Ian Fleming, clearly a clever bloke and a bold one too, kind of had the life experience, and just the clever mind for this whole spy business. Now, when he got out of the army, he tried to become a writer and did, and he published his first book, his first James Bond novel, Casino Royale, in 1953. And since then, there's been 14 more books written by different authors. The first few were, of course, by Ian Fleming himself, but the mantle has been passed on, and I believe the most recent one came out in 2015, and I would expect more to come out.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I read somewhere that he actually wrote Casino Royale right before he got married to kind of get away from the stress of his wedding day, which is kind of hilarious. That he's got all this stress in his life, and he goes and just writes this spy thriller, which then takes on a whole life of its own.
Yeah, I don't know. Is getting married stressful, Jonathan?
A little bit, but afterwards it's all good.
Yeah. The wedding is a different thing from a marriage. Anyway.
So another quick tidbit, Alex, did you know that Ian Fleming is actually related to Christopher Lee?
No, but that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I don't remember where I found that out, but he's like a first cousin or something. I don't remember exactly how they're related, but there you go.
Well, Christopher Lee has played a Bond villain.
Oh, really?
Yes. It is a impressive roster of actors of fame and of little fame who have played a Bond villain, and I believe Max von Sydow was one, Christopher Walken was another. There's a bunch of them out there. Anyway, it's a fascinating list. I would recommend diving into it. But anyway, the first James Bond film, Dr. No, was released in 1962. And that was released by a company called Eon Productions, which is still around today, although I believe they have a new parent company now. It was started by the producers Albert R. Broccoli, which is a fascinating last name, and Harry Slatzman. who are producers of Hollywood fame, mostly for doing James Bond. And in fact, Eon Productions is run today by one Barbara Broccoli, and the family relation is clearly available in that wonderful vegetable of a last name. And in fact, they are about to release their 25th Bond film ever in 2020. At least that's the planned release. It's only the top of 2019 right now. There's a lot of life to get through between now and then, but hopefully that'll come out, and hopefully it will be great. There's also been a few other adaptations of James Bond into film, which we're not really going to talk about in depth today, but bear some mentioning. The first of which is a live TV production. So, like when they do the live TV production of Grease these days, they used to do that a lot more. In fact, we actually talked about one in the Scrooged section of our Christmas episode just a few weeks ago. But yes, they did a live TV production of Casino Royale in 1954, which starred, of all people, Peter Lorre as Le Chiffre. There also was, weirdly enough, an Orson Welles, Peter Sellers, David Niven spoof of Casino Royale in 1967, and I have watched it, and it is crazy. It is all over the place. So people have been spoofing James Bond since basically James Bond was a thing, which is fascinating. And some people might even say that James Bond and his exaggerated nature is almost a spoof of what real spying is. But since real spying is kind of secret, we don't really know. And a load of other reasons. Anyway, the other kind of oddball film that fits into all of this somehow is Never Say Never Again from 1983, which is a remake of Thunderball, which through a weird series of who retains what filming rights was retained by one of the people who made the original Thunderball, but was remade, Never Say Never Again, outside of the Eon umbrella, so it's not one of the official Eon productions, but they did get Sean Connery out of retirement to make the movie. In fact, the name of the movie, Never Say Never Again, comes from what Sean Connery's wife told him when he told her that he agreed to do the film, which was Never Say Never Again. Because that was the second time he had come back to play Bond. Like, he quit once, came back for 2 more movies, quit again for like 6 Roger Moore movies, then came back and did this third-party Bond. Which
I saw that when I was scrolling through the list of Bond movies. I was like, this is like 20 years after the first Bond movie, and Connery comes back after a different Bond has been in the seat for a long time. I was like, what is that all about?
Yeah, it's out of the Eon umbrella. I don't want to say the Eon continuity because that's not really a thing, more or less, but it is under the Eon umbrella, or isn't under the Eon umbrella. But it's interesting because Never Say Never Again deals with a much older Sean Connery than he was in the 50s and the 60s, playing, James Bond, and they make it part of the character. Like, James Bond being old and the program being old is a thing in Never Say Never Again. Very much in the way we'll see it be a thing in Skyfall today.
Right.
Which is one of the movies we're talking about. And speaking of our film selects today, Jonathan, do you want to run us through them?
Absolutely. So we're starting with From Russia with Love from 1963, which is the second of the films, but one that implements a lot of the Bondisms that we know today. It was nominated for a Golden Globe for Best Song, From Russia with Love, which I feel like is kind of a running thing with the Bond movies because that is one of the Bondisms, is the Bond song at the beginning. And it was directed by Terrence Young. The second film we'll be talking about today is a Roger Moore Bond with The Spy Who Loved Me from 1977. This was nominated for Best Set Decoration, Best Original Song for Nobody Does It Better, and Best Original Score. And that was directed by Lewis Gilbert. And finally, we'll be talking about Skyfall from 2012, the 50th anniversary of Bond, which won Oscars for Best Original Song, Adele's Skyfall, and Best Sound Editing, as well as nominations for Best Cinematography, Best Original Score, and Best Sound Mixing. And boy, is that cinematography amazing.
Yeah.
That's really why I picked this movie.
Yeah. I mean, Roger Deakins, man. I don't know off the top of my head. I'm sure we've done a outproportion number of Roger Deakins films on the show than other cinematographers, but that's for a reason. Also, we should mention that Skyfall was directed by Sam Mendes. Both Terrence Young and Louis Gilbert directed multiple James Bond films over their tenure and kind of, shed their influence into the series, but they were kind of best known for the James Bond series. So when we're talking about James Bond today and the different eras of James Bond, we'll also be talking about their body of work, mostly. So yes, let's dive into it. For From Russia with Love from 1963, Jason set that up for us.
From Russia with Love from 1963. Following the events of Dr. No, the secret organization known as Spectre is out for revenge against 007, otherwise known as James Bond. To this end, they've recruited an expert assassin known as Red to work alongside Number 5, a chess champion, and Number 3, a turned Russian intelligence commander. Following the strategy set by Number 5, Number 3 recruits a beautiful Russian intelligence officer, Natasha Romanova. She lures Bond to Turkey by offering to defect, claiming to have fallen in love with Bond from his file photo. Bond and M, knowing this to be a trap, send Bond in anyways. Spectre plays puppet master, pulling the strings of the Russians, British, Turks, Gypsies, and Bulgarians, pitting them against each other and obscuring their own role as they try to kill Bond. Has James Bond finally met his match in the full force of the Spectre organization, or has Spectre picked the wrong 00 to go after?
All right, Jonathan, what was your first impression of From Russia with Love?
Okay, so I know you went through and watched all these movies. I decided to just pick a couple and kind of get a general feel for the whole series. I had seen some of the Craig ones before, so going back to Dr. No, From Russia with Love, and Goldfinger, which are the 3 Connery films that I watched. This was one of those weeks where I go back and I watch a film that was super influential, and I think of like all the things that came out around it that were either influenced by it or that it was influenced by. So I was thinking about a lot of things like North by Northwest and Charade, and things like that, which obviously have some direct cultural implications because they come out at around the same time. It's just kind of the flavor of this type of film that was coming out around that time. But I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed what we're going to talk about, stuff like the noir aesthetic, the dark and shadowy lighting, the plot twist, the espionage. I mean, obviously that's what James Bond is all about. Some of the Bond films, obviously, throughout the series kind of lose that, but I think that this is a really good specimen of pulling in all of these classic noir elements and the kind of burgeoning neo-noir genre and pulling them together with this literary franchise that has gone on to just keep going on, really.
Yeah, and I think we've loosely described neo-noir earlier as noir but with color.
Yeah,
more or less. But I also like the idea of neo-noir being noir mixed with something else. And I feel like that's what's going on in this one. And I do think that I think one of the reasons this one sticks out to me, the first James Bond film I watched was Goldfinger. And that is definitely like an over-the-top crazy Bond. Not as over-the-top and crazy as they get, because they will get crazier. But, compared to the down-to-earth nature From Russia with Love, Goldfinger's way out there. So then coming back to watch From Russia with Love was really nice and refreshing. And doing some digging and some research, it's probably closer to what Fleming imagined Bond to be himself. Not that, the authorial intent is the end-all be-all, but it's important, and it's interesting to see how something evolves. So, obviously Bond was supposed to be a bit more of a embellished, a bit more wish fulfillment, a bit more escapism than an actual nitty-gritty spying story. But it was still dark and sneaky, and Bond wasn't like the super charming guy. In fact, Fleming described Bond as kind of being like a dull everyman to which interesting things happened. Yeah, and that kind of gets flipped on its head. when Broccoli and Slatzman come in, and they're like, we want somebody with that Cary Grant charm. And so they picked somebody who has definitely escaped it, but definitely kind of at the beginning of his career was typed as a Cary Grant type in Sean Connery. And, just pick this super charming dude and put him in here. And so now we have this interesting mix in this film of this down to earth, nice, dark, gritty. If you look at some of the stills I posted on our Instagram this week, you'll see what I mean when I'm talking about like this dark noir lighting. There's this excellent portion where somebody is sniping a Russian agent, I believe.
Right.
And
yeah.
they're using Bond's shoulder as a prop, and they're standing behind this grate that is casting this grated light on them. That's just so noir and so sneaky, and the whole scene's very quiet and sly. Like it's high quality stuff, but it's mixed in with this crazy big stuff like the I'm going to say gratuitous gypsy fight.
There's a lot of things about Bond, even from the beginning, that we can call gratuitous safely.
Yes, very much so. So it's this interesting mix, and definitely in the end, I think as we move forward in the series, the wish fulfillment, the fantasy, the gratuitousness takes over and definitely wins. But this one, I think the most actual spying gets done in this movie compared to all the other movies.
Yeah, and that's another one of my first impressions of this movie, is that it felt a lot like an adventure film. And coming from the Connery films, which, of course, or not the Connery, the Craig films, of course, all the Bond movies, like, I guess, are adventure films in that they go all over the world. But some of the things like Casino Royale and Skyfall feel more like just kind of action flicks than like adventure, because this one had like undertones of westerns. It had, like, especially in that gypsy fight, I was feeling like Fistful of Dollars and a lot of stuff that I don't know. It definitely felt like an adventure film, and I think The Spy Who Loved Me does a lot of that really well too. And even though this isn't like crazy over the top, it still felt big, and it felt alive, and it felt exciting all the way through.
Yeah, and they accomplished that pretty well with, they shoot a lot of it on location. They use their locations really well when they're sneaking through a church in Istanbul, like they're in a church in Istanbul.
Yeah.
And it's really pretty. That entire scene actually reminds me of the museum scene from Torn Curtain.
Yeah, it was very Hitchcockian.
Which is great. I love that scene. I love it when it pops back up in Grand Budapest. They use the big parts well, and there's a good job of pacing at this point in the series, especially in this movie, between when we need to be dark and serious and when Sean Connery and the production crew is having fun with what's going on. And it all mixes together pretty well. So even though, the gypsy fight scene is crazy and over the top, and then it ends with the Russian assault on the gypsy camp, maybe they were the Bulgarians. It was intentionally confusing, which is a big over-the-top fight. Like, important stuff comes out of that fight that impacts the secret spy, sly, sneaking around bit of everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And we need to talk about the Bond-isms, or the trademark Bond things, because those are getting set up here. And one of the things that we're going to see is that, especially in these later films, Bond has kind of become this thing of this self-referential ball of films that kind of are drawing on this history that they can never like completely get back to, and yet they're going on because those were set up so well. So things like Bond's seduction of women, to go really general, or specific things like the gun that he uses and the Aston Martin that he gets in Goldfinger, and stuff like that, are all being set up here. And they're being set up so well and so iconically, the martini, that they can keep coming back. And at some point they go from being like trademark Bond things to being Easter eggs almost.
Yeah. The Bond film series has gone on for so long that it can Easter egg itself, which is fascinating. Right. And it has always
and
had
it almost
like
has to Easter egg itself, or else people get disappointed.
Yeah, right. And it has like this inbuilt sense of meta-ness to it, even in the sense that the original writer of the original novel was a spy writing a spy story. So like they know what the actual spy story is supposed to feel like, and they know they're messing with that format. And then we get to the point where we know what a spy story is supposed to be like, but the Bond film is messing with the format. And then we get to the point where we know what a Bond film is supposed to look like, but the next Bond film is messing with the format. And there are definitely points in the series where some of that self-referentialism is really satisfying and cathartic and well done and well timed. And there's definitely parts where it doesn't work at all and just feels, again, gratuitous and ham-handed and over the top. Thankfully, I don't think we picked any of those movies today, although they might bear mentioning in the overall section at the end.
Right. But yeah, some of the things that we should bring up specifically, just so that we can come back to them in these later films, are obviously his charm and the fact that he will get with basically any woman at any time. That's like not even an exaggeration. His weapons, the fact that he has gadgets, which he has far less of in this movie. He doesn't even get the Aston Martin until the next film in Goldfinger.
I love his gadgets in this movie.
Yeah, they're very simple and effective. But
they're very not Skyfall.
Yeah, right. Which I'm very excited to talk about how it comes back to that kind of feel. And the Bond villains, obviously, which this one is very interesting because it sets up Blofeld, but does not ever show him, which is definitely the point for a while of Blofeld. There's a lot of like double crossing on both sides of this. And aside from like all the women that Bond is involved with, there's usually one specific one who I like to say either betrays him or dies, or both throughout the film.
That's very accurate.
So we definitely have that here in this one with the Russian. I guess she was an agent too. I'm realizing how many parallels there are between this movie and The Spy Who Loved Me.
Yes, they're all parallels, Jonathan. They're all parallels. Even the movies that aren't based directly off of an Ian Fleming book, especially in the early series part of the series where Ian Fleming's still alive, like he's helping to write them. So yeah, there are a lot of parallels, and there's a reason why and we both talked about this when we were discussing watching through all these movies. You watched through a good number of them, and I watched through all of them because I'm needlessly extra like that. I don't know why I'm like this. They kind of start to blend together in a way, and that's because they do repeat a lot of beats, but also those beats are really formulaic. Effective.
Yeah.
The beats are effective. So what's the point in straying too far away from them?
Yeah.
Especially at this early point where they're like running this long game series in the first few Bond films that are essentially building up to a climactic confrontation with Blofeld that kind of happens, kind of doesn't. The plans for that were kind of thwarted when Sean Connery didn't want to do On Her Majesty's Secret Service and George Lazenby did it. And that's not a knock on George Lazenby. It's just like continuity kind of got broken a little bit for a moment.
But then it became a precedent in itself because now the regenerative nature of Bond is a thing, and we're going to actually talk about that in Skyfall. And some other characters that we should bring up because they are established pillar of the series is M, who is James Bond's boss, the head of MI6, and Q, who is James Bond's quartermaster or the guy who gives him all of his gadgets.
Do you know how
also
long it took me to
Moneypenny.
realize that Q stood for quartermaster?
I know. I saw it in your notes whenever you got to Skyfall, and I was like, they call him the quartermaster in like Dr. No, I think, or From Russia with Love, at least.
It's so easy to miss that stuff too. And plus, like between then and like when I got to Skyfall, I had to see John Cleese be Q, which is maybe the only role I did.
Well, no,
enjoy
that
John
wasn't
Cleese in.
Skyfall. That was at least Die Another Day. I don't know.
Well,
what
yeah, I'm
other
saying
movies
like the John Cleese moment like wiped it all from my mind.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was like forget about it, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's those guys. I also want to mention the fact that we don't really see Blofeld like you mentioned,
right.
And in fact, that's a tension that's building across like Dr. No, From Russia with Love. I think maybe a little bit of Goldfinger, and then like the next.
Actually, he was completely absent from Goldfinger. They didn't even mention him because I went
Goldfinger
straight from Russia with Love to Goldfinger, expecting like, oh crap, what's gonna happen with Blofeld? And then I was like, oh wait, this is just about Goldfinger.
Yeah, I mean they kind of do the same thing in the modern series of Bonds. To be fair,
yeah, that's true.
Even though I'm sure there's a connection between Goldfinger and Blofeld, there's
the interesting thing is
everyone in Blofeld.
They don't even do like the Avengers thing. Well, they'll be like, there's just been this crazy robbery that happened and we found some cat fur. Oh no, it must be Blofeld. They just like don't mention him until they need to use him or something.
Yeah. But anyway, I was going to mention that like they're doing this thing and it's a very effective thing. We talk about it a lot in monster movies, in which you don't want to see the monster too much. Because it kind of ruins it. It kind of takes away their fear and their fright. Like a lot of the fear doesn't come from seeing them. It comes from the dread of seeing them and like the mystery and the tension. And of course, we've waxed poetic about that on and on and on. But one of the things that makes the Bond series work so well is that they're very good at that specific thing in the Bond movies that work well. And the Bond movies that don't work well, they typically blow that out the window and try to show you the bad guy right away. But in this early run of films where we're building up this tension to Blofeld, it works. And we're going to do that again in Skyfall. So the Bond series has found things that work for it and sticks to it, which is a good idea. And, we already mentioned a minute ago, I want to get to this before we get off this film, the charm of Sean Connery and the idea that originally James Bond wasn't necessarily supposed to be the most charming guy, but the producers thought it would be good if they had a charming person in the role. And then Sean Connery ended up with the role. And of course, he's Sean Connery. He's one of the most charming creatures to have ever existed, period.
Yeah.
Like he says a word and you're like, yeah, I'll do what you want. What do you want? Like, I'll do it.
Which, arguably, it's like one of the only reasons that Marnie actually works.
Yes. Because
we
otherwise
talked
that
about
character's
Marnie
way too creepy.
Yeah, and it would be way too disturbing. It's already very disturbing, but Sean Connery is able to kind of make it work just because of his personality. Yeah.
And that's not a redemption of that character by any means. That character's still messed up. But like Sean Connery is providing the oomph of his charm to pull it back. And this goes to, and we're going to talk about the different incarnations of Bond and how they're used and so on. But Sean Connery's Bond is so effortlessly charismatic that it almost feels to me when I watch his movies, especially compared to other films, that he almost just spies as a hobby. Like
it kind of does feel like that.
He's just like having fun, having an adventure. He's friends with everybody. He always wins. He always gets every girl. Again,
he's
going
like,
back to the
all right,
fulfillment that's
I'll
inherent
do it
in the series. But that's just his style of Bond, and he's so charming that Bond becomes charming, and every Bond since has had charm to some degree or another. It's a prerequisite of the character. Sean Connery was so successful, and his charm was so pivotal to making Bond work, even though that wasn't part of the original idea of the character, that it has become associated with that character. And that's why, when people find out that Fleming's idea of the character wasn't in line with, charming, suave dude, like you were, Jonathan, a minute ago, you were like, that's weird. It works so well. Well, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So shall we get on to The Spy Who Loved Me from 1977?
We shall. Nobody does it better than Jason Harden. Jason, take it away.
The Spy Who Loved Me from 1977. British and Soviet nuclear submarines have started to disappear, and while both sides look to blame each other, the British Secret Service calls in James Bond to investigate. Meanwhile, 007 is busy escaping Soviet agents in the Austrian Alps who are trying to kill him. In his escape, he kills one of the Soviets before ski jumping and then parachuting off of a cliff. The Russians call in their top agent to investigate as well, the deadly and beautiful XXX, who also happens to have been the lover of the agent Bond killed in Austria. Now Bond and a reluctantly cooperative XXX, who's promised to kill him once the mission is done, must track down the identity of the person stealing submarines. In Cairo, they face down the henchman villain known as Jaws and discover that the scientist and shipping magnate, Karl Stromberg, is behind it all. They race to his villainous lair in the middle of the sea known as Atlantis. Can the two agents put aside their own conflict and save the world?
All right, thank you, Jason. Jonathan, again, I have seen The Spy Who Loved Me first because I watched way too many Bond movies in the past month. What was your first thoughts on seeing The Spy Who Loved Me, especially considering that like it's been parodied like a billion times?
Yeah, and we'll definitely have to talk about that. But again, this is another adventure film. It definitely Roger Moore has a different feel than Sean Connery, which we'll get to. But nobody has the same thing that Sean Connery does, as we were just talking about.
Would you say nobody does it better?
Nobody does it better. But this film again has a lot of those adventure beats. I mean, they're literally using the score from Lawrence of Arabia at some point. They are
that is the score from Lawrence of Arabia.
It is the score from Lawrence. Like at some point I was like, okay, we got camels, we're like getting some references, and then they used the score from Lawrence of Arabia, and I was like, okay, they're not even hiding it.
When Roger Moore's riding the camel, he's dressed like Lawrence of Arabia.
Yeah.
And I was like, this sounds like David Lean film score. Like, is it? But I also knew that you'd watch it and you'd know. So
it definitely was. And even before that, when we have the big spider thing, the Atlantis thing coming out of the water, they're doing like a Kubrickian classical score. So this film is almost very like film referential.
Did you mention Kubrick?
I did mention Kubrick.
Can we do the thing?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
The thing where we talk about Kubrick.
Yeah, we could talk about Kubrick.
Okay, let's talk about Kubrick. Do you know the giant set in this film, Jonathan, with the the 3 submarine docks?
Yeah.
Like just the immense, like, and this is something we'll get into depth
Was that a soundstage? I was wondering that.
They built that. They built that thing from scratch. This is the point that these movies are at. Like they're making like just money hand over fist, and Hollywood is pouring.
This is the third Roger Moore, so he's like well established.
One of the reasons that I picked The Spy Who Loved Me is because it is Bond at its biggest. I mean, big, not just like has a lot of money in them. Because once you get into the Pierce Brosnan era, like they're doing big set pieces, they're doing big chase scenes, they're spending a lot of money on it, but they're more contained. This is a movie that shows off how big it is and puts its money into its set, into its locations, into its Lawrence of Arabia, like stolen scenes, basically. But anyway, they have this giant ship that's been capturing submarines in the film. And it has like a dock in it that can fit 3 full submarines in it. And all of the accompanying submarine men, I'm not going to say the other one. Not out of like prudishness, just because I know how podcasts are. I don't want my voice on tape, I guess. Anyway, but yeah, so the cinematographer for this film did a fantastic job, but it's a big film. It's a lot of work. He gets to see this set the day before they're supposed to shoot stuff on it. And somebody's like, and they're like, here you go. You have a day, light it. And he's like,
oh gosh,
what do I do? Well, conveniently, this was shot at Pinewood, which is the famous home studio of Kubrick. Kubrick, I don't know if he was shooting something at the time or if he was in like pre-production, but he was around. And he was friends with the cinematographer. And the cinematographer was like, hey, Kubrick, can you you might have an idea on this. Can you take a look at it? And so Kubrick comes in and he lights the set. So when we're watching it, like, and we spend a lot of time in the set because, of course, you spend that much money on something, you better freaking use it. We spend all this time in the set. We see a lot of dramatic scenes. We see a lot of action scenes, a lot of explosions, and it is lit really, really, really well to give it shape, dimension, not feel too big, not feel too small. You can see the people move around in it. It feels dramatic. It feels dire in the sense that it's like part of this arch-villain's plot. And it's the cool thing is it's all lit by Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah, that's awesome. So a couple other things that I was thinking going through this. One of my first impressions was, man, that Jaws guy is like looks really familiar for some reason. And he was in a very famous Twilight Zone episode. Go figure.
Wait, which Twilight Zone episode was he in?
So he is the Canaanite in To Serve Man, the big alien with the huge forehead. So he's a very pretty famous character from Twilight Zone.
He's a fan favorite Bond henchman, man. He was so popular he gets brought back for another movie.
Yeah, I was surprised about that too. Looking through it, I mean, he is very entertaining. I mean, he's got such an interesting thing with his metal jaws, and then the fact that he goes jaws on the shark at the end. Spoiler alert.
Yeah,
it's just insane.
I feel like this came out after Jaws, right?
Good question. I was looking up.
Yes, I feel like Jaws was early 70s.
75, yeah, right after.
Okay, so they knew what they were doing when they were referencing stuff. They knew what was up, and they loved that they flipped it on the head. Like, and that's part of what I love about the Roger Moore era is that it's self-aware of how ridiculous it is.
Yeah,
it fits into its own ridiculousness, which is great. And it kind of winks at itself in this really smart way, like, Jaws biting Jaws, but also it's not oversold. Like, there's not some idiot going there, standing on the side, going like, I thought the shark was Jaws. Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So it's smart, it's clever, it's understated where it needs to be, and overstated everywhere else.
Yeah, it's definitely not Blofeld sitting in the shadows. This one, we have a big Bond villain with big plans and big henchmen. Literal in all the senses of the words.
Yeah, well-themed henchman, now that I'm thinking about it. His base is called Atlantis. His henchman's called Jaws.
And as you were noting in your notes this week, Alex, like the whole movie does a good job of using all of its Bondisms to a thematic effect. So even the gadgets, like the car is a swimming car, and like they have all of these things that match with this kind of aquatic theme of the thing. So it does a good job of holding itself together, and it's not just kind of being over the top for the sake of it. It actually has a cohesive thread throughout the whole film.
And to pick up on what one of the things I mentioned a minute ago, that Jaws has another movie. The movie right after this, Moonraker, is also big and also over the top, but probably a bit too over the top. And
is it out of this world, Alex?
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, I guess we should talk. The one thing I didn't mention in From Russia with Love, because I feel like it wasn't as big a deal, but it started to become almost ridiculous with the Pierce Brosnan films, is the double entendres and innuendos in these movies. Definitely get picked up here in kind of a charming way. And then I only watched one of the Pierce Brosnan films, but Die Another Day was almost like an innuendo vessel. It was just like only existed so that they could put in these Bond double entendres.
Yeah. Die Another Day is like me telling jokes. Like he's not even telling jokes to like make you laugh anymore. He's just telling jokes because he can.
Yeah.
And that's the point it reaches there. And that's what I mean when I say that sometimes the Bond series got a little too knowing. Like you have to have fun with it, but also like
calm down.
Yeah, calm down. But yes, also the double entendre is strong with this one as well.
That last line, though.
Not every single Roger Moore film, but most of the Roger Moore Bonds end in the exact same way in which Roger Moore has saved the day, is typically stranded in a boat. In one case, in the end of Moonraker, in a, sorry for all the spoilers, but I feel like it's not really a spoiler because you know how these end. They all end well.
Yeah.
In fact, the only Bond movie that doesn't end happy, we're not talking about today. So,
yeah, Skyfall is kind of bittersweet.
No, I'm not even talking about Skyfall, man.
I know. I'm just saying that it's not exactly a happy ending in Skyfall.
It's fair. It's fair. But the day is still technically saved.
That's true.
So it ends with everything ends with Roger Moore in a boat or a space shuttle, with the main woman of the film, the one who, in Jonathan's words, he either betrays him or dies or both, or was planning on it. And in the case of The Spy Who Loved Me,
yeah,
did
sometimes, yeah.
Or what is her name in Moonraker? You wouldn't know. Dr. Feelgood or something like that. Anyway.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, no, it gets real bad, man.
Well, I mean, The Spy Who Loved Me is the one with Pussy Galore, isn't it? Oh, no, that's Goldfinger. I'm sorry.
That's Goldfinger. Yeah.
Still, Dr. Feelgood is not the most ridiculous
There's
female
an entire film named Octopussy. Anyway.
Oh gosh.
But they all of the Roger Moore films end with him making love to the main Bond girl of the film, which becomes less and less of a distinction as time goes on. And then his bosses, or sometimes the prime minister, I think there's one episode or one film. See, I just called it an episode. That's telling. One film where Roger Moore is being called by like the Iron Lady herself, Margaret Thatcher.
Oh gosh!
And like instead of Roger Moore picking up, the parrot who's been listening to Roger Moore the entire film says all of Roger Moore's cheeky lines into the phone, and Margaret, I keep wanting to say Margaret Thatcher. No, that is it. Margaret Thatcher is like flirting with James Bond, but actually it's the parrot. Like,
oh my gosh,
it's all really dumb. But they all end with like a really bad double entendre. Like the end of Moonraker is, "Sir." One of the guys is like, "What is Bond doing?" And the other one of the guys who's looking at the same feed is like, "Sir, I think he's going for re-entry," because they're on a space shuttle coming down to Earth.
Yeah, The Spy Who Loved Me was almost just as bad, where they're in their little escape pod from the Atlantis thing, and someone just asks Bond, "What are you doing, Bond?" And he says, "I'm keeping the British end up." And then he closes the curtain.
Yeah, oh gosh,
it's so bad.
It's real bad. But I mean, that's what these movies become, and that's what, again, keeps them being successful. Like it's full bore wish fulfillment for, and like, let's be clear on this. This is for a predominantly male, predominantly white, definitely predominantly heterosexual audience, and it found a large success with that audience because, you know, coming out in the 70s, like that's what was being catered to, and it was successful, and it kept being successful. And at least in in the Roger Moore era, it knew how kind of ridiculous and silly it was, and like it played into it. So you have these really funny, ridiculous moments where they're nodding and winking at what Bond is, like at the end where he's keeping the British end up. But you also have like amazing set pieces of action cinema that are happening all throughout this film that are still really cool. Like you have
the pyramid scene was awesome.
The pyramid scene is fantastic and creepy intense. I think the pyramid scene where Jaws is like creeping around, being followed by Bond, being followed by the Russian agent XXX in the film, is utterly fantastic, and the closest it gets to From Russia with Love.
Yeah, it almost felt, almost Indiana Jones-ish in that kind of like big action set piece, exotic location kind of a feel, which Raiders doesn't even come out for another 4 years or so. But Star Wars comes out in the same year, so we're kind of getting into that blockbuster era, at least in America, kind of getting into these like huge kind of fantastical films. And of course that's what Bond is, but The Spy Who Loved Me is just amping that up and kind of falling in line with all those things. And it does a really good job of it. There's a lot of stuff that happens in this movie. And so I kind of do want to put those parallels between The Spy Who Loved Me and From Russia with Love, just from a plot perspective, because From Russia with Love, we have, first of all, the America-Russia tensions. Of course, these are all kind of playing off of Cold War things. And From Russia with Love, we have the Russian female agent who is supposed to be tricking Bond and then falls for him. Of course, in that one, she didn't really know that she was working for a different agent than the Russian government the whole time. In The Spy Who Loved Me, it's a Russian agent who has to work together with Bond. And then she has like this really flimsy excuse for wanting to kill Bond, which I was not sold on whatsoever. And then he wins her over, of course, throughout the film. But yeah, it's really interesting.
I believe XXX's reason for wanting to kill Bond.
It just wasn't set. It wasn't set up very compellingly. It's like she was in love with some extra that he killed at the very beginning of the film, while she was with another guy.
No, it's the same guy.
Was it that guy?
See, I got,
because those scenes are almost concurrent.
The same exact thing happened to me. And this, we should talk about this. When you're setting something up like that, that's this subtle, sometimes you've got to hit your audience over the head with it. And sometimes you don't know how much you have to hit your audience over the head with it until you show it to somebody.
Yeah.
And, that's one of the reasons why you have test audiences. And just friends to look at your stuff. But, in this one, I rewatched it a second time when I went through to do notes. And the guy she gets the call to investigate the missing submarines, right? And they do the whole fake out in the scene where it's like, oh, Agent XXX is our best ex, and you see, or best agent, and you see this dude in bed with a woman, and you're like assuming, oh, it's the Russian James Bond. Of course, it's the dude. Where this is misogynistic male wish fulfillment, and then suddenly the female answers the phone. And you go, oh. But if you listen to what his like one line in that scene, he's like, I have to be in Austria in the morning. And he is. Okay. And they like show his face in a close up to like confirm it. But it all happens so fast and they jam so much in at the start of the film that like it's more than excusable that you miss it. And so
I literally thought that Bond and the girl were those scenes were concurrent. Like supposed to be happening at the exact same time, and that this guy, she was with some other guy, and the guy that he killed was just some random extra.
Right. Like there's at least a day long, probably 2 day long time jump between the cut where she is with her lover who Bond kills, and Bond is with his lover at the moment, who is actually a Russian agent. He doesn't know it, and I don't know if he ever knew it or cares to know.
She like betrayed him. I think he just assumes that everyone is going to betray him because like as soon as he leaves the hut, she radios.
Roger Moore definitely knows. But it's totally feasible, and I know why they made that cut between the two Agent X and James Bond, both in the middle of making love or have just made love. In the first. Between Agent X to James Bond, but it's too well connected actually.
Yeah.
And to your point, like it does make it feel like it's concurrent. and that throws everybody off. But if you had made it a harsher cut, you'd be like, oh, okay, this guy who's skiing down the slopes, that's Triple X's lover, who James Bond is now going to kill, and now you understand why she wants to hurt him across the rest of the movie. Although honestly, like if she had been sleeping around, it wouldn't have been any better or worse than Bond sleeping around. But let's talk about that, not specifically that, but the way in which Roger Moore acts compared to the way that Sean Connery acts. And I don't mean as actors, I mean just their style of Bond. I think both are charming. I think Sean Connery just is so charming, he can't help it. Like,
yeah, he just oozes it.
Yeah, it's like him breathing, like it just happens. And Roger Moore is charming, can be charming, knows he can be charming, and can also be very, very clever and very, very cruel, and uses them in turns throughout the film. And
yeah, I felt like he had a little bit more of a Steve McQueen, Paul Newman, like kind of, he had a straight man face, whereas Connery didn't need it because he could just charm his way out of anything.
He did. And you know what? It's hinted at in some of the various Bond films that a lot of Bond's sleeping around is actually supposed to be part of his job. Like he's got to do whatever he's got to do to get where he needs to be to learn the things he knows. And
whereas that was like a huge emotional like turmoil in Hitchcock's Notorious, and this is just like, it just throws it in the background.
Yeah, like it's I think they use it once as an easy excuse when one of the actresses who play Moneypenny is more upset about one of Bond's affairs than others, or one of those few films where Bond has two main love interests that are actually two main love interests, and he has to pick one, and the other one is like upset or something. The love interest is very, very flaky.
Okay, question, Alex.
Yeah.
In this film, the Russian spy, when they're realizing that they know everything about each other, she mentions that he was married before. Does that show up in one of the earlier movies that I missed?
That is in reference to the one James Bond film with the sad ending.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
I don't want to say too much more because it's going to spoil stuff, but yeah.
Okay, good to know. I didn't know if that was just kind of like general backstory or if that actually came up in one of the films.
Yeah, no, I was actually, real quick, I'm going to finish my point about Roger Moore, and then I'm going to dive into this. But yeah, Roger Moore uses his wit as a weapon very, very deliberately, and you get the sense that he's there to do a job, and should he run across a woman he finds attractive, he'll sleep with her. Whereas Sean Connery is just kind of like sleeping his way across the globe and like occasionally spies. But yeah, so yes, in this movie, they make a reference to James Bond being married, which is a reference to On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which is a one-off with George Lazenby. And it's a one-off in the sense that it's the only one in which George Lazenby is the Bond, plays James Bond. But
right.
Like, it's interesting that they'd reference it in a Roger Moore film, because it's almost as if it acknowledges that it's all part of the same character's continuity, even though at this point, like in 1977, like it's starting to get a little mathematically impossible.
Right.
Pushing that border. Definitely by like 2012 it is.
It's Doctor Who without the magical resurrection.
Yes. They definitely a hard reboot after Pierce Brosnan.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So there's no thought, but definitely these are kind of all meant to be the same character, and James Bond is not an alias. Like, that's just the name of the character, and for whatever reason, he doesn't have an alias besides the designation 007.
Yeah.
By the way, Jonathan, real quick, just super random trivia fact. What was Ian Fleming's code in World War II?
Was it 007?
No, it was 17F.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I know. It's like weirdly disappointing. You look for something in it, like you're like, it has 7 in it. Maybe that's it. But
no.
Really, 7 was probably just like a cool looking number, and they were like, yeah, let's put it in there.
I mean, it might have he may have picked up on something while he was working as a spy that, actually does have significance, but maybe we'll never know. Okay, last thing on The Spy Who Loved Me that is also a parallel to From Russia with Love is the train fight. They both have this really epic fight on a train. That is also very Hitchcockian.
And there's boats in both of them.
And boats. Yeah, I mean, like a lot of the set pieces feel very similar, which is why I think going into this episode, I was a little afraid that I was going to mix the two up.
Yeah, no, I didn't realize it when I was originally picking them. I was just like going off of like what I knew about their impressions and stuff, but they work well together.
They're two that have been parodied many times and referenced many times, but they just have a lot of similarities and similar beats and stuff like that. But both very solid in the Bond canon. And so, yeah, with that, let's move on to get to some modern Bond. And we, according to our filming structure, we pick 3 movies. So we are going to just skip over Pierce Brosnan, go back and watch
Timothy Dalton.
And Timothy Dalton.
Which everyone thinks is the worst Bond, and I don't think that's fair, but this isn't the time for that soapbox. So
I have no say. And we'll just skip over the return of Sean Connery, which we already mentioned at the top of the episode, and go straight to Daniel Craig in his 3rd appearance in Skyfall.
Skyfall from 2012. James Bond, 007, is dead. Killed on a mission to prevent the theft of a list containing the secret identities of every single NATO agent around the world. In London, the fallout is harsh. M comes under fire from the government and is told she would be voluntarily retiring in the near future. The Parliament is now considering shutting down field operations entirely in favor of cyber espionage. Then boom, MI6 headquarters are destroyed in a cyber terrorist attack, someone specifically targeting M herself. Just when all seems lost, Bond returns from the dead. He'd been hiding out in South America, living a relaxing life until his country and his boss needed him. Now the older, injured, and perhaps outdated Bond is up against a changing world and a villain who uses this new world and new technology to his advantage. With the help of a new younger Q and a new younger agent Eve Moneypenny, can 007 and M prove that old dogs with new tricks still have a place serving their country?
All right, Alex, I have seen Skyfall. I think I saw it in theaters when it came out, our senior year of high school, to date us once again. So you get to give me your first impressions after watching through all of the Bond movies and finally getting your way to the second to most recent.
Oh, man. This one, well, especially in lieu of having seen all of the previous ones, so being unable to like grasp like the significance of what they're doing, turning stuff on their heads in this film, referencing old stuff, hinting at old stuff. And even just like the fact that I watched this nearly immediately after Quantum of Solace was deeply satisfying to see Skyfall. I was like freaking out for like the first 15 minutes. I was like, this is good, yes. It was a little hard for me to take notes on it, but I managed to do it. It was a very good movie. I was very happy with it, and it went in places that I did not expect it to go. But
you also called a lot of stuff reading through your notes.
Yeah, but like a lower percentage than I normally do. Man, I sound like such an asshole. I sound like Rhett and Link talking about their hot tubs.
Maybe it's because you're just kind of like steeped in the universe, but I was impressed about the M and Moneypenny calls and stuff like that. Of course, I watched this and I've only ever seen Casino Royale beforehand, so I wasn't I didn't know all the things that I was supposed to be looking for.
Yeah. I feel like in one of the old ones they might have called M. Mallory at some point.
Oh, okay.
And they were like, oh, I didn't know that stood for anything. Also, like, Ralph Fiennes was too likable right off the bat for him to be a villain.
Yeah.
So, and unlike and I think this is bad casting in Spectre, like where they cast the guy who played Moriarty as the guy who inevitably betrays everybody. I'm like, well, yeah he betrayed everybody. Like, that's what Anthony Perkins was talking about when he's like, yeah, I knew I was sacrificing my career when he took that role in Psycho because he knew he was going to be typecast for the rest of his life. Well, the guy who played Moriarty is going to be looked at like through slit eyes for the rest of his.
He's just too good at that deceptive guy.
Yeah, you don't trust him. But yeah, also like the Moneypenny thing was really good. Like especially like the second that they were like, yeah, I'm off active field duty, I was like, oh, okay. And like they were, like had that semi flirty relationship at first, and then the really flirty relationship.
That never explicitly goes anywhere, which is important.
That's the point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if she wasn't Moneypenny, there probably would have been much more explicit.
Yeah, right. Like the fact that they weren't sleeping together in the first 5 minutes of the film was like, oh, she's Moneypenny. Yeah, no, I really enjoyed this. But it's still like I could not figure out what Skyfall was until
because it's an arbitrary name, really. I mean, it's kind of thematic, but it doesn't have any bearing on. Oh yeah, of course, it's a old mansion in Scotland.
Yeah, and we should clarify because I feel like mini spoilers. Skyfall.
Yeah, and this is a recent movie, so if you want to watch this movie, go watch it because you definitely should.
Yeah, it's real good, yo. It moves really. It goes down super smooth. Like you are going to feel like 10 minutes of your life went by when like 2 hours went by, which is always something I love in a film. But yeah, like Skyfall is the name of James Bond's childhood home, in Scotland, and he hates that place, but it becomes a part of the film. And when the therapist asks him about it when he's retraining for active duty early on, I was like, maybe that's just like the name of the mission he was on. Maybe it's the name of some protocol for like burned spies or dead spies or something like that.
Yeah, I thought it was something like that because he's doing the word association and the guy says Skyfall and he's visibly shaken by it, and then he says done. And so I thought it was like, okay, it's something he's gonna do, but it's like, no, I'm done with this. Because it's really ambiguous and vague, which is great for creating that suspense, which is paid off beautifully at the end.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about this next point, the idea of flipping all of the traditional Bond beats on their head, because that's going to permeate this entire film discussion. So typical Bond beats that are flipped on their head in this film, and keep in mind that we've already been talking about how meta James Bond tends to be, even from like
this
the
one
get-go.
is extremely
this
so.
is very meta. Like typically, like James Bond is younger than Q, and Q is like an older guy. He's played by the same character for many films in a row. Well, in this one, James Bond is old, and suddenly Q is young, and he's the up and coming one.
Yeah,
Moneypenny starts
makes
out
sense.
as a field agent instead of being the desk agent.
Right. I love the fact that Q is like the young computer nerd kid, because that's a lot of what this movie is about kind of this modern technological state of things and how that affects kind of the job that Bond is doing, but really how that affects just everyone's life and safety and security. So, I mean, the old quartermaster, the old kind of like British guy, like definitely makes sense for those older films. But I feel like this is a really like, it feels natural that the new quartermaster would be this young kid who's kind of super into hacking and all that kind of stuff. And it makes sense for the eventual conflict of the film.
Yeah. And a lot of the themes of this film are pretty natural. Like it's about the natural cycle.
I definitely want to get into the themes
of life, like how things turn over, and everything is built very well around that theme. Like the turnover of things start and things end. Bond has started and ended basically over and over again. Oh gosh, what other things get flipped on their head?
Well.
Before we dive too far into themes, Jonathan.
Okay.
I just want to list all the things that get flipped on their head.
So one thing that doesn't get flipped on his head is there's a woman who betrays him and then dies.
This is true. And you know what's crazy about that, though, Jonathan? It is flipping something on its head because M is now a Bond girl.
Yeah, to an extent.
Not in the sense that they slept together.
Not like a romantic extent. Yeah.
Well, that we know.
Okay, Alex.
It could happen. I bet there's fanfic out there about it.
Oh gosh. All right, we're done with this. But yeah, she does. And again, spoilers, but she dies, and it has an emotional toll on Bond.
I don't know that she died. That's my headcanon.
Okay.
I think because everybody's talking about how Bond should have just stayed dead, like it's a perfect out.
That's true
for that line of work. I was like, I think she faked it.
And then okay, so the one way that they do flip the Bond's hypermasculinity sexuality on its head is with the villain. Javier Bardem, his villain is perfect because he has this like really weird, creepy kind of like psychological, sexual game that he plays with Bond, and that is definitely flipping it on his head because Bond is, he's a little bit fazed by it, but not not as much as a normal person would be, and it's like turning that on its head and kind of just because
we're so used to
how do I put this?
We're so used to seeing Bond as the sexual aggressor.
Yeah, there you go.
That we're not used to seeing him being the victim of somebody using sexual aggression to make him uncomfortable. And like the bad guy, what's his name? Silva?
Silver, yeah.
Silver. Okay. Silver does a very good job of making Bond uncomfortable. And he doesn't just do it to Bond. He does it to multiple people throughout the film. And it's weird. It's very weird. And it's
he even does it to M.
Yeah, he does. And it's kind of using the fact that like Bond has the amount of sexual aggression that Bond has in most of his films is like unnaturally large and probably not healthy. But
the other thing is that Silver is not only being sexually aggressive towards Bond, but I think this is what I'm trying to get at, is that he seems sexually attracted to Bond, which is not typical for especially male Bond villains.
Oh yeah. And I couldn't. So at first I agreed with that, and then I was like a little unconvinced. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't, because he was doing the same kind of weird aggressive pattern with the Bond girl who accompanies Bond to his lair. And I was like, I can't tell if he's attracted to one of them or both of them.
Well,
or if he's just
the girl
like
is already
psycho.
It's already his girl that he's had working for him. So there's probably already a thing there.
Maybe. I don't know. The whole thing is very confusing, and I think intentionally confusing.
Right.
Because again, it's flipping the traditional role of the super spy male being the sexual aggressor and getting all the females on its head. And that's the point, is to throw it into chaos and to not just make Bond uncomfortable in that, but also make the audience a little uncomfortable in that, because the audience, especially the white male heterosexual audience who's been having wish fulfillment through Bond for decades, is suddenly feeling a little uncomfortable about it, and suddenly, like disconcerted in the way that Bond is disconcerted. And anytime that you can get your hero and your audience on the same page emotionally, especially when it's relevant to the theme of a topsy-turvy world, and things ending and cycling and changing, that's good. That's what you want to make happen. So mission accomplished.
Yeah.
And we've already kind of talked about a little bit, like a lot of this is about the new and changing world, the out with the old and with the new. Even when Bond meets his new quartermaster, his new Q, the young kid with the computer, they're staring at, this is the famous shot that everybody sees from this movie, where they're sitting in the art gallery and they're looking at the painting. But if you look at the painting itself and what it's about, it's a newer ship, a new steamship, hauling an old sailing vessel that's wrecked in for salvage.
Yeah.
Which is
telling. And that's the tension that this film kind of deals with. It's not just a out with the old, in with the new. It's a how do we start over while keeping without letting go of all of the tradition and the old stuff. And I think it does a really good job of tackling this theme because, we have new conflicts, new kinds of threats, I guess, especially in the bit where Judi Dench has her really dramatic monologue talking about how the state of security has changed and the state of everything has changed with technology and the way that people can be hacked from behind a computer screen, and there's no faces to villains anymore. And then also just getting back to, because, the whole MI6 is undergoing this thing of like, are they outdated? Do they need to be updated and replaced? While Bond is going through the same thing. And then, as you noticed, at the end when we have like, if it comes down to it, the old ways are the best with the knife, and Albert Finney there with a beard, who I didn't realize was Albert Finney until this watch through.
Nobody realizes it's Albert Finney until it's Albert Finney. That's how it goes.
So yeah, and then the whole Bond series is going through that same thing of it's trying to keep up to date and keep modern while still holding on to those roots, because those roots are the only reason that it is where it is. And so it does like these really brilliant moves where it has Q come up and starts giving him his gadgets, but it's just a gun with a palm print on it, which is really cool and useful, and a radio, which goes back to flipping Goldfinger. It even looks like the one in Goldfinger.
Yeah. And it's also very useful.
And it's also very useful, yeah.
Yeah.
And then he says, "What were you expecting? An exploding pen? We don't really go in for that thing, that kind of thing anymore." And that almost feels like the filmmakers saying, "All right, guys, we're simplifying it. No more invisible cars."
Oh God, the invisible car.
We're kind of getting back to basics. We're getting back to the action, the espionage, the personal stakes for Bond. Rather than this really like showy, flashy, kind of, wish fulfillment kind of thing. Like, I mean, obviously it is still that to an extent, but there is some substance behind it. And there's a lot of things that it's saying about itself, about the series, and about the characters. Yeah.
And to a large extent, to a lot of people who are, of a certain age where they might feel like the changes of the world are happening so fast that they can't keep up with them. But, time keeps moving on, and while you're still around, and, you will continue to be part of the world and be part of that makeup, and learning how to mishmash the old and the new for best effect is part of life.
Yeah, and in a larger plot sense, that's what happens also, because as we were saying, like a lot of these characters get recycled in this film, even though it's kind of in the middle of Craig's run, because we have a new M, we have a new Q, we have a new Moneypenny, and so all of these things are kind of being cycled through, and it feels like a refresh, even though we're already in the middle of an existing Bond run with Daniel Craig's movies.
Yeah. And we have, Bond is old in this one. Like, not just like old in the sense that he's old, but he's also recovering from an injury.
So we feel old. That.
Like, he fails the physical test when he's retraining to repass his clearances to be a spy again, or a 00 again. They don't really call him a spy anymore. They just call him a 00. But yes, it is different and permeable and a little weird that it's in the middle of an actor's run, but also kind of fitting that it's in the middle of an actor's run. Yeah.
I think Craig is able to pull off this really dramatic and thoughtful addition to the series really well. And I guess we should talk about Daniel Craig, because if Roger Moore was colder than Sean Connery, Daniel Craig is even colder than that. And almost his coldness is part of his charm in a really interesting way.
Yeah, his like disaffected distance.
Yeah, it's even part of his seduction effect.
Yeah. It's weird. It's like super cynical, and like this turn in the series, the past few films have definitely been more cynical,
and critical of itself, as we've been talking
critical
about.
of itself, and maybe part of the way that Craig delivers Bond's, quote unquote charm is part of that cynicism. Like it's more and more clearly a tool in this one. And you feel its use of it even sharper than you do in the Roger Moore era. Like a lot of the fun has been taken out of him using the charm. Like it's still really entertaining to watch. Like it's fun for the audience, but he doesn't seem like he's having a lot of fun.
Yeah, there's none of that Cary Grant banter is left at this point.
Yeah. It's a far step from Sean Connery, but even then, like it still feels like Bond because it stays true to enough of it while refreshing it at the same time. Which is fascinating. And I think this might be a good spot to slide into overall nuts, Jonathan, unless you have anything that you really want to talk about that's specifically Skyfall.
No, let's move on into overall so we could talk about kind of like this general, because like as long as we're thinking about it, this kind of slide from kind of feeling like a North by Northwest, like Cary Grant romp, with Sean Connery being very charming and clever and witty and fun, to Craig, who, as you noted in your notes this week, Alex, feels almost more like a Jason Bourne movie, because that's obviously one of the landmark action films of this era, and it's much more serious. It's much more dark and gritty and high stakes. And it's not all about Bond floating away with a girl at the end. It's about what does this mean for Bond going forward.
Yeah. The Bond series is a stone that gathers moss as it rolls. I don't know if that's right. What I'm trying to say, I fucked up that metaphor. What I'm trying to get at is that the Bond series has existed in time, like the creators who continue to make Bond films to this day have existed in time, and are influenced by things and are changed by things along the way. So, like the Pierce Brosnan movies of the late 90s, early 2000s were influenced by the increasingly ridiculous and over-the-top and CGI-influenced blockbusters of that period. And
i.e. The Matrix, etc.
Yeah, and Skyfall was influenced in turn by the slight return back to Earth of a lot of keystone movies between 2003 and now, which is important, and it's really like, if you're curious how. So the Bond series makes a great study for how to keep a series going for a long time successfully, and I think it will continue to make a good study for that, and not just in the sense that like you can keep doing the same thing over and over again and it'll work, because that's not necessarily true. Trust me, I'm watching through the Godzilla series right now. That is not true. Eventually you have to change a little bit, if only for the sake of giving your audience a rest and giving them something new. But also like times change, and art should reflect the time that it's in, and
the conflicts that people face.
Yeah, and if nothing else, like doing the same thing over and over again is boring. Like it would be fun and it's refreshing to do something new. And when the people who are making a movie are having fun with it, like it is going to be better. Like when you, like sometimes there's stories about sets that are complete disasters and nobody gets along with anybody, and by some weird accidental miracle they make a fantastic movie. But those stories,
Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah, like those stories are much rarer than the sets where everybody has a good time and is firing on all creative cylinders together and makes good things together. If you've ever listened to a story about the making of Caddyshack, none of those people will remember because they're whacked down on drugs for half the duration of the making of Caddyshack. But those of them who do remember will tell you that it's an entirely fun process to make that movie. And you can see the fun in the movie. And that might be a little more of an obvious example because it's a comedy. But I think the same holds true for these films. I think they had fun making Skyfall. They knew what they were making. They were having fun pushing the boundaries. Everybody who was in that film was pushing a boundary in some way. Like all of the actors had a significant job cut out for doing them.
Yeah.
And
pretty much all the characters had character arcs.
Yeah, they did. They really did. Nobody ended where they started.
Right.
It was well done movie across the board, honestly. But yes, so the fact that it's still around, that's managed to change successfully and stick around, but also hold true to itself. Like Skyfall feels different than From Russia with Love, but it doesn't feel that different. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a different series.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that's the other thing about Bond is that it's one of these things that, and we've talked about with a couple different types of reboots and stuff on the show before, but it's one of those things that you can just put someone else in that role and keep it going. So like, even though obviously there's no way like the same agent could have gone on all 24 or whatever of the missions that the movies comprise of now, it's still like it's this ongoing thing. It's kind of like Sherlock Holmes in the fact that it's episodic, like you mentioned earlier. It's episodic in the sense that you can keep doing very similar things over and over again, and you can replace the person who's in the driver's seat, but it all still holds together and it's all still entertaining, and it makes it almost infinitely malleable and updatable to whatever time period it's being made in.
Yeah. And you know what? Looking forward to the future of Bond, I think it's going to be around for a while because nobody can go that long without remaking things.
It's still making money.
And honestly, like it's never been a big enough gap to consider it completely off, like completely out of production. Like even between like the last Pierce Brosnan one and the first Daniel Craig one, which I think was actually only a span of like 2 years.
Yeah, it was pretty quick turnaround.
So very
for such
quick
a big reboot.
Especially, for a giant reboot. They were probably considering a change for a while before they did that. Like even looking at the very last Pierce Brosnan one, like it feels very different than the early ones. Like GoldenEye feels very different than whatever the frick the last one is. Is the last one the one with the ice castle?
Yes.
Ugh.
And the invisible car and the diamonds in the face and the gene mutating. That happened.
I'm not making the sound of a light didgeridoo because I was pleased with that film. No, I mean, so the period, the film has definitely gone through ebbs and flows, right? Like, there are periods where it's a little smart in how self-referential it is, and there's periods where it's not so smart in how self-referential it is. And it pushes boundaries and it plays with it. And sometimes it's going to push boundaries and it's going to fail, and sometimes it's going to push boundaries and it's going to succeed. There's Quantum of Solace, which I don't blame anybody for because there was a writer's strike going on. So like they made that movie off of half of a script. And like kudos to them for finishing it, really. But yeah, the films are going to keep on happening and they're going to look different. Daniel Craig has made it very clear he doesn't want to do this forever. And they're going
Although is he signed on for the next one?
He's going to do 25. Yeah, he's going to do.
Yeah. Because I know there was one point where he was like, I would rather put glass in my eyes than play Bond again. And then it was like, oh, he's going to come back and do the 25th Bond film.
Yeah. Bond or Craig himself is a very, very blunt person. He doesn't do the typical song and dance that industry people do around how they feel about things. Which I both am like, it's not a great way to play your hand, but also, I don't blame you for it. So it is what it is.
Fight the man.
After his like 4 or 5 Bond film run, he'll be set for the rest of his life. So he's got one more in him, and then they're going to cast a new Bond. Just judging by the way things are going in terms of casting and future, the odds of the next Bond being another white guy are very slim. I would say
I've heard lots of rumors about Idris Elba, and
I think Idris Elba would be very, very cool. He's got that suave and charm. Like, he could do some cool stuff. He is already up there a bit, and the next Bond film after this next one would be a little farther after that. They might want to go with somebody younger, and I'm sure there's a large talent pool out there, but we'll see what they do. We'll see what they do. There's always the chance that they might finally decide to go with a female James Bond, which would be interesting. I don't know if they
definitely
would
harder logistically, but I mean, at this point, it's Bond.
Would they call her Jane Bond?
That's a good question.
Because again, James Bond is, and this isn't a problem to casting a woman. I'm just bringing up like a question of like what are they literally going to write down on the script? Because James Bond again is not an alias. It's just like a shittily kept secret for a name. Like in retrospect, like that could have been done better. And
even Jason Bourne was an alias.
Yeah, even like the idea that James, this is clearly. So at the end of this episode, I think the number one thing we can say, Jonathan, is that the entire idea of James Bond was so clearly written by a British middle-aged white man stressed out on the day before his wedding that like it's undoubted that Ian Fleming is the author. It was so clearly that person who wrote it. It is male wish fulfillment. It is unstressful. It's a little rushed in concept. And yet it's made a series that has lasted forever. I mean, if they had just made James Bond a code name that every 007 gets, like it would all work really well. But
yeah, that's true. Like, yeah, but no. Anyway,
I mean, they've already cast a female Doctor Who. I don't know how much British control really Eon is right now, but maybe they want to go that route too, because so far that seems to be panning out for Doctor Who. We'll see. It'll be fascinating news when it happens. It's going to take a minute. We still have another Daniel Craig movie to get through before we get to whatever the future of Bond looks like, but hopefully the now multiple generations of people who have grown up with this film series and have now become the makers of this film series will continue doing a good job shaping and creating how this film series grows and changes with the times as we move forward.
Absolutely. But that is just one of the very influential film series in the history of film itself. And we are tackling 4 over the next couple weeks. So, Alex, how about you tell us about which series we will be talking about next time?
Okay, we are talking about the Planet of the Apes next week. We are talking about 3 specifically, and we played around with the format of this episode a bit, trying to figure out what would be the best select films for it, but we decided to go with one from each of the 3 reboot or versions of the films. One is the original, one is an actual reboot, and one is an attempted reboot.
It's kind of a prequel.
It's weird. Anyway, so the first one is, of course, the original one, the masterpiece, which I was blown away by when I watched. Planet of the Apes from 1968.
I was actually surprised you hadn't watched that.
I thought I had, Jonathan. I think a lot of people think they've watched Planet of the Apes.
Because you know the references and all that.
Yeah, and you've probably seen the scenes or seen copies of the scenes or seen the Planet of the Apes musical episode of The Simpsons. But no, unless you remember a bunch of people just walking around on a desert planet for the first 30 minutes of a film, you haven't seen Planet of the Apes.
Right.
So we're going to be doing that one. We're going to be doing the Tim Burton one, which is going to be a fascinating discussion, Jonathan. I'll be on my best behavior, I promise.
We've talked about some good Tim Burton movies, so I think we're safe.
We've talked about a lot of Tim Burton on this podcast.
Of Tim Burton, yeah.
So much Tim Burton. Anyway, Planet of the Apes from 2001, featuring Mark Wahlberg,
oh gosh,
and Helena Bonham Carter, and a whole bunch of other people who are in the movie, and that's what I can say.
Including Charlton Heston.
Yeah, right? What? Anyway, and then finally, we're going to be talking about the centerpiece of the most modern reboot of the series, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes from 2014, which I think is a fantastic movie. I know people who don't think that, but we're going to be just diving into why it's good and what about it works. So yeah, that's what we will be talking about next week, Jonathan. And of course, if anybody would like to help support the show, or if you're just interested in the nice perks that we have up on Patreon for you, if you want to be the democracy of one who picks our poll episodes until another person shows up and signs up, please go to our Patreon, links in the blog post, and check it out. Or if you just want to buy us a cup of coffee, put some money in our tip jar, go check out our coffee page, our Ko-fi page, our Ko-fi page.
We definitely, I've had 2 cups of coffee while recording this episode, so it definitely helps.
Recently, Jonathan, I did a DNA test through 23andMe, not a sponsor, although we are open to that, of course. How seriously do you think people take our sponsorship jokes? Anyway, I took 20.
No one with any sponsorship power has listened to this show, I'm assuming.
That's true. But anyway, I took a 23andMe test, and it said I was genetically predisposed to drink way more coffee than the average person. And I can tell you, I did not need a DNA test to tell me that. It was. I in the post-production line of work, it's just what happens.
Yep.
So yes, please check it out. We have a lot of cool content coming down the pipe this year. If you are interested in what we do, what we talk about, if you are a glorious film nerd, and I always say the word nerd with love and affection, please check that out. If you're interested in our Patreon content, go there and check it out. It should be a cool year, should be a great year, as our series is a super year.
Final note, for people who were listening to our podcast at the end of last season, we covered A Christmas Carol, 3 different adaptations, and we created an audiobook, and we have released that for free for all of our listeners. So if you're interested in that, we've gotten a good majority of the guests that we've had on the show together, plus a couple of other people associated with the show, such as my wife and my mom, to put together an audiobook. So if you're interested in that, go check out the blog, and you can download that for yourself.
That's about all the time we have for this episode.
If you have movie suggestions for us or just want to reach out, I can be found on Twitter at JSSatchel.
And I'm at Alex Garinger.
And I'm at the Blue Jay 1994.
And to find links to things that we talked about today, you can view them on the blog at thefilmlings.com.
If you like the show, let us know. Leave us a review on iTunes so other people will know what we're all about.
We definitely appreciate it.
Talk to you next time.
All right, see ya. Yep, I have nothing to say to that.
I can't see his face right now, but I can feel how angry he is with me, and I'm okay with that. Again, much like some of the Bond movies, sometimes you make 2 jokes a little too consciously, and that's okay.
Yeah. Exasperated is a better word.
Exasperated is a great word. At least I'm not in an ice castle.